Hello, chess friends. This is National Master Paul Agram, and welcome. Today, I basically want to go through a game that I've played since a 6 year break from tournament chess. This took place at the San Diego Chess Club, and I'm very excited to. This is actually the second game after a 6 year break, so I'm very excited to share this with you. It's a very interesting and exciting game, full of interesting, both tactical and strategic ideas. Actually, so my opponent is he was much lower rated at the moment, about 1950, but I know the player, and he was a very strong expert, and I'm sure he still is. He has always his rating has fluctuated greatly between 2150 and 1950. The player's name is Alejandro. So Alejandro, I open with d4, and Alejandro responds with d5, and after this standard move, we get this rare move by today's standards. Now this used to be played quite a bit, but and by the way, even Hikaru Nakamura himself has played it, and many other creative tactical players have played it to get d4 players off their comfort zone. But by today's standards, in the age of neural nets, this move is really, this is not played that much at high level anymore, and certainly is not played at a very high level at all, because this move is almost refuted. However, I I can totally imagine that at club level, even at master level, this can be given a whirl. And so, the natural response is just take the e-pawn, and the only really good response, and then black pushes the d-pawn, taking space. And now, after knight f3, just developing normally, protecting the pawn and attacking the d-pawn, Alejandro plays this move. Now, this is an offbeat move. And I'm not sure to what degree this is very sound. Probably not particularly sound, and it's very likely that it's completely losing actually at this point. Really, what black should play is, for example, this knight c6 move to just protect the pawn, and this is just a good solid move. Followed by something like g3, knight e7. This is just a normal variation. Now, another way black can play is, instead of knight e7, he can develop the bishop attacking my knight, after which I fianchetto, and after queen d7, and both sides castling on opposite wings, we have a sharp position, and black can attack, and white, and white can counterattack. So this is very interesting play. And by the way, a very interesting tactical moment here, because if bishop h3 here, just trying to exchange the bishops immediately, white has a very interesting and very thematic tactic with pawn pushes forward, and now black really has to recapture the pawn with the bishop and give the tempo back to white. White is essentially purchasing a tempo with this pawn move by giving the pawn back, and by the way, the pawn would have fallen anyway in all likelihood. So this is, just notice, by the way, if queen takes, we have this fork, which is really nasty, winning a piece. And if pawn takes, we win the bishop anyway, because now the pawn interferes with the line of communication between the bishop and the queen. And so here, just bishop takes. Now, by the way, the correct continuation is queen b3 after the bishop recaptures. And this is, again, an excellent position for white. We're going to stop analysis here because this is really outside the scope of the conversation, but this is the best and sharpest move, and one just has to know this continuation. Computers have shown that this is absolutely destructive. Knight e7 is, like a very standard move after the fianchetto, and this is a very common idea which wasn't played in the game. I'm reminding my viewers that I'm just showing variations that one would typically play, or the plans that black would typically employ in Albin Counter-Gambit. Now, in the game, a very different variation with bishop b4 check happened, And let's bring that position back. So Alejandro actually checks, and here I just very naturally defend. He has to take, knight takes, and after Alejandro defends with the pawn, this position is likely just completely lost. Is it, by the way, an unsound move? You know, g3, just normal development. But here, basically, I didn't know refutations. I had no idea this is such, I mean, people just don't play an unsound variation, and who knows. But I felt during the game that since I haven't seen this move much, that there must be something there. And I really felt like black is really behind in development. It just kind of felt to me that way. So my idea was to just develop naturally and see what happens. And Alejandro plays this move, and a very interesting thing, by the way, that instead of g3, we have this queen check, which is one refutation to this whole variation. And after my opponent would have defended, here's queen a3, just putting pressure on the c pawn. And it's very inconvenient to defend because eventually in this position I would have fianchettoed my bishop with pressure on the long diagonal. So this is just a very uncomfortable position. And yet another refutation is just this b4 move, which is very thematic in Albin lines for white. And yeah, I mean, this is just a refutation. White wants to fracture the d and c pawns, and so basically like put pressure on the d pawn and win it with just tremendous activity. Like for example, if c takes, knight e4, knight e6, and finally after this check, black loses the right to castle, and really white has a one position. But I mean, there's still certainly a technique that's required to convert this, but it's clear that this is a lost position. So let's see what actually happened in the game. In the game, none of this happened because I played, this still good natural development, but certainly not a refuting line in this variation. And after bishop g2 and queen, basically queen and knight are trying to recapture the pawn and castling. And it was here that I basically started feeling like I'm going to win. Takes, queen takes, and well, I'll pause here for a second. I'll let you find the best and winning move. So I'll give you a few seconds. I encourage you, by the way, to pause the video. Okay, so here, the best move, human and computer, is just push the e-pawn. Because, look at it, white is fully developed and black only has the queen developed, and the queen is lined up with the king. So it's no wonder that had my opponent taken, here, basically the refutation is rook e1. Okay, so none of this actually happened in the game. And my opponent decided to push past and to kind of like develop the rest of his army. But it's clear that the d3 pawn is going to be gone because black has no resources to really defend it. Either the pawn will be gone or the position will be gone. So after I just take my queen out, Alejandro decides to just give me the pawn because he needs to develop his pieces, right? So he develops the knight. I capture the pawn. The b pawn is taboo. White's b2 pawn. And Alejandro gains some temp on my queen. Black castles, and it is here, around here, that queen takes b7 is absolutely winning. However, knowing how much my opponent loves massive tactical positions, such as Albin players often do, I didn't want to give him a chance to complicate. I decided to just calmly press with my material advantage. And so, let's see what happened. I played this calm and, pretty boring move, knight f3, instead attacking the queen. He brought his queen back, and I'm just taking my rooks out. So my opponent plays this good move to counter my bishop's influence on the long diagonal. I'm doubling the rooks, my opponent brings a rook over, and a trade of rooks in the center ensues. Here, sort of in this position, it's pretty important to not capture rook with the queen, but to actually capture rook with the knight. It's a better move to essentially, because the bishops are going to be traded anyway, and the knight really is not doing anything on f3. So takes, queen pins the knight, this calm move to get out of the pin, and after my opponent creates a window for his king, again, this remaneuvering of the knight to a square where it wants to be at the moment. And after some pretty standard moves, my queen gets on the long diagonal. Look at the difference in the position. So just one extra pawn. The extra pawn enables white to control the d4 square, and to, with his c pawn, he's controlling the d5 square. And my opponent cannot oppose this control of the square. So not only do I have the extra pawn, but I also have control of some critical squares. And really, this enables my pieces to be better. Okay, so after the position is completely symmetric, by the way. It's really amazing how symmetric the position is, but the extra pawn is actually worth more than an extra pawn because it amplifies the power of my pieces. And so after knight c6 and a calm move h3, my opponent tries to attack the c pawn, but my queen gets centralized, forcing the knight to go back. So little by little, I'm improving my position. By the way, here an interesting line is really my queen is taboo, because if queen were to take here, my opponent is simply losing in this endgame. This endgame is completely lost because I'm just, look, I have the kingside majority, which is going to become mobile, and I have a passed pawn, which my opponent is always going to have to babysit. So the combination of these two weaknesses would essentially, by the way, also amplify the activity of my king versus my opponent's king, and this is a lost endgame. Okay, so none of this actually happened in the position. Instead, I played g4 move. So just to go back to the position that it was before we started discussing the variation, I'm just basically playing g4. My opponent also plays what he feels as an improvement, and I push the h-pawn. Now, my approach is not really, the best way to convert, but it turns out to be good enough. Later, I'll show you a variation which computer recommends, the winning variation. But at the moment, let's look at what happened in the game. My opponent pushes the g-pawn, I take, and it's the losing position. He shouldn't have pushed the g-pawn. Now, it was a losing position anyway, but now it's catastrophically losing. And so after I bring my knight forward, and my opponent pushes the f-pawn, defending the queen, I made this. By the way, the b-pawn is taboo, right? Like, you might be wondering what would have happened had the queen taken the b-pawn, right? I mean, let's actually consider this. Let's say queen takes b-pawn. This is completely losing because I just take here with a check, take the other pawn with a check, come back with a check, and after this move, if my opponent were to come up, there's this and there's a checkmate. So there's either he loses massive amounts of material or he gets checkmated. So this variation is not a possibility, right? So let's actually backtrack a little bit to the position that we had where my opponent had the opportunity to take the b-pawn. So the b-pawn is taboo, and my opponent realizes that, and he pushes the f-pawn. Just kind of makes sense. We're black is trying to be solid. And of course, I could have captured the c-pawn and increased my material advantage, but I could play this calm b3 move, straightening out my pawn structure. And it's really, black is pretty much in Zugzwang. The position is pretty much losing, and it has been losing for a while, but now it's, like I said, catastrophically losing. The c-pawn is going to fall, and whatever else is going to fall. But my opponent makes the final inaccuracy, which enables me to decide the game much quicker. So he pushes the king up, enables me to penetrate into his camp with the queen, and after he drops back, I remaneuver the knight. And look at the difference in king safety. My king has an extra pawn surrounding him and protecting him from all evils of the world. And my opponent does not. And so it's kind of natural that my pieces are more active and I'm getting ready to invade with my knight, and the combined power of queen with the knight in this position, black is not going to hold. So, but black tries. He kind of goes here with the knight, trying to control the invasion of my knight. Unfortunately, there's this calm move which really ends the game on the spot, just here. So the tactic here that is threatened is queen takes knight and then knight fork, winning a piece. And there's really nothing that can be done here. And so really my opponent just plays a desperation move, I guess, just playing on autopilot. And after this check, he has to give up his queen. He plays one more move to give me a spite check, and he resigns here. So I think this game is very instructive. I think the most instructive part of this game is just kind of realizing how an extra pawn, just one healthy pawn, is more than just a pawn, that it can amplify the power of the rest of your pieces, enabling you to really convert. And also, this is a nice warning for people who might be interested in playing Albin. I don't discourage people from playing Albin Counter-Gambit. I think you can be very creative with it and really get some interesting results and get some interesting positions, some sharp positions. I mean, who cares that it's refuted by the computers and is not played by Magnus and Hikaru anymore? Because for even a strong player, even a master rated player, there's enough problems to solve where it's one can easily be confused. And also a lot of people don't necessarily, knowing by the way that Albin is nearly refuted, a lot of people are not going to analyze it too much. So there are lots of avenues, but the warning is that if you do play Albin Counter-Gambit, make sure you know your lines, make sure you play some good sharp lines and play behind some serious preparation. Well, thank you and goodbye. Looking forward to seeing you next time.